Great. We're back to hearing more from Father Gregory Boyle. Is there anybody else who has some questions, maybe some things that move them? I know I do, so that's why I'm like, wait.
Me too, me too, me too. I'm like bursting. First of all,
Yeah.
I'm the same as Genevieve. I am like, I love the work that you're doing. I've been following it for years, and so I'm like geeking out right now, the fact that you're on the Zoom call with us, and I am also trying to hold my composure.
We're all trying to
But yeah, it was one of the first books that I was given as well when I started this work in Brooklyn and so I have just been so just so blessed by your words, and your stories have just really just touched my heart and made me feel like seen, like in the work that we're doing with Young Life. And so, got to put that out first, and then I have to add my question. So I had a really quick question regarding what you had talked about in your story regarding helping to heal the wounded and not being afraid to welcome your own wounds. And in the work that we're doing, we're always carrying that tension of having to carry other folks' wounds, and also bringing up our own stuff and our own wounding and our own things that we're working through. And I know that you've been doing this work so much longer than many of us on this call. And so my question to you is, how do you hold on to that tension? And how do you care for yourself in the midst of that and still be able to pour out while also making sure that you are caring for yourself? I'm horrible at self-care. And I know that if I want to be in this for the long game, I have to get better at it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts around just how you've been doing that. I know there's probably not like a science to it, but like, how have you been managing that?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for your kindness and your nice words, and for the honor of the whole geeking out thing, so, which is a new concept for me. But anyway, I think here's the trick. You don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make me different. And that's key, because if it's the reason you go to the margins to make a difference is an insistence to keep it about you. And if it's about me, I will burn out, and you will be depleted, because you're going to the margins to save, rescue, fix, and it's not the way it works. And this is why people leave ministry or refugee work or ministry in the streets, because it became too hard. And then their narrative will be, I guess I'm just too compassionate. And I always go, no, you allowed it to become about you. As long as it's not about you, if you go to the margins with the widow, orphan, and stranger and hope to have your heart altered, then it becomes about us. And so I'm doing that all the time with my staff here, and we're quite large. But people will do that, and I'll say, no, be anchored in the present moment, delight in the person in front of you, arrive every day to your life, wanting your heart to be broken open so that it becomes wider to allow other people in. And our vulnerability is kind of the Velcro of our connectedness. That's how you connect. That's how you attach. And the only way to do that is to be vulnerable enough to allow yourself to be reached by people, to receive who they are. And then that's eternally replenishing. And that's the key. So I'm not big. Somebody wrote a book on self-care and wanted me to write a blurb. And I felt bad because I don't really believe in it. Yeah, go for a walk and take a week off. And yeah, I guess. But I kind of don't believe in it, because it feeds into that narrative. I'm just so compassionate that I carry all the burdens of the world, and I just need to take care of myself. No. If you approach this as Jesus did, where his heart is broken by people. And that's a good thing. That's an opening thing. That's suddenly you're open-hearted and tender, and that's wildly and endlessly replenishing. And so that's where you want to be. That's the spot where you're delighting in who is about to walk into your vicinity. And if you're attentive to that, then it's so rich. That's where the joy is.
Wow. I'm so glad. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Dee.
Father Boyle, I love the picture that you painted. Again, that statement of we don't go to the margins to make a difference, but we go to the margins so that folks at the margins makes us different. My question would be, it sounds great. How do you know that you're qualified to go to the margins? Like, what do you leave behind? Because obviously, like, you can't go in there thinking you have all the answers and you can do everything to fulfill the role. But so, like, what are some of the steps, the tangible steps that qualify you to be present in that moment and to be available, to be taught?
Yeah, I think if you're the proud owner of a pulse, then you're qualified. And that's the key, because we're endlessly disqualifying ourselves. I think in my early days, gang members who were kind of working with gang members, they always had respect for me. But there would always come that moment if we were in a room, in a conference room, and they'd say, Father, with all due respect, gang members are more likely to listen to us than they are to listen to you. And I always said, you're right. If the task is yakking at gang members, but since it never is, it's only listening to gang members. It's only receiving gang members. It's only valuing who they are so that they'll feel valuable. It's only about pulling the favor out of people so that they feel favorable. Then anybody can do that. And that's sort of the key to kinship, is that there is no such thing as step aside, let me handle this. I'm going in, it's a dangerous job, but somebody has to do it. No, it's a human thing, which is kind of freeing and liberating for everybody. Find me somebody who can't be beneficial in their receiving another. Well, everybody can do that. And everybody's wounded and everybody is broken. And so we connect to each other in our brokenness and in our wound and in our pain and in our ability to stand in awe at folks. And so it doesn't mean, you don't study or you don't prepare, but the preparation is only so that you can be vulnerable with people and listen to them and receive them and allow your hearts to be reached and altered because they've entered into your vicinity and you've entered into their vicinity. And then you keep it exquisitely mutual. It's not a thing that I'm bringing to anybody. But somehow in the presence of each other, we can look each other in the eye and say, oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. And everybody mutually is inhabiting their own dignity and nobility. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's God's dream come true, that you may be one. That's John Lewis. We all live in the same house. He doesn't say one day we might live in the same house. He says it straight out. We all live in the same house. He doesn't say some people are in the basement and some people are on the third floor. No, we live in the same house. And that's liberating, because it's not an aspiration. It's a truth that we have to discover and embrace and acknowledge as the ultimate truth given to us by God.
I have a question for Father Boyle. I Pastor Tope was talking about in his message, this sort of, we get the invitation upside down, where in the Western church, we invited people to behave first and then to belong. And rather, in this age, it is probably more effective to invite people to belong, to your last point about inviting people to these small groups to help with their parenting. Father Boyle, in your early days of Homeboy's industry, what was the most challenging aspect of creating a place for these formerly incarcerated young men to belong?
Always the greatest obstacle was the wholesale demonizing of this population. It's hard to retrieve now because it's, at least in Los Angeles, it's not the same kind of thing, but they were the most demonized, left out, marginalized subgrouping of the poor than anybody. And so the whole, the effort on the part of the police, the demonizing was writ large. So that was the hardest piece, because how are you going to find employers willing to hire them? Or how are you going to find people willing to give you money to help folks who are tattooed and, recently released from prison, or whatever the case may be? And so you stand with those who have been left behind, and you also try to shine a light on what is keeping them behind, and how our communities are over-policed and how our folks are over-incarcerated. And so you're always trying to advocate from a place that's embodied, that's from the community itself. And so that's always been the challenge, and to put a human face on the gang member, to say that, we're all born wanting the same things, and there is no such thing as a monster. And you stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than in judgment at how they carry it, because they simply have to carry more than everybody else. And then you have a reverence for how complex their lives are, rather than this get tough silliness that we really did embrace 30 years ago, but not so much anymore.
Thank you for sharing that, Father Gregory Boyle.
Father Boyle, I have a quick question for you. I was very moved by Jose's story about his mother and the abuse that he faced. It was incredibly moving. The process of recovery from addiction, child abuse, and childhood trauma, I'm sure is a long process. As you may know, a lot of New York City kids are under a lot of pressure from both parents, society, and their peers academically and in performance. Some of these wounds may be difficult for our kids to see as negative or damaging. Would you have any tips on how to help these kids realize the hurt and pressure on them, even though it doesn't necessarily have a negative context?
Well, I think, we always want to come at things with, behavior modification or correction, or, I think part of the trick always is we can lament or shake our fist at scarcity, but what we need to do is to be invited to abundance. Even in our current climate, you'll see things like, I stand against hate. And I always think, well, that's not a very good diagnosis, I mean, you can look at, Charlottesville and people holding tiki torches and shouting horrible things. Well, there's not one healthy person at Charlottesville holding a tiki torch, not one healthy person. And you can say, well, no, it's about hate. And I go, nobody's ever met a healthy person who hated another person. It's about health. None of us are whole until all of us are whole. None of us are healthy until all of us are healthy. No lives matter until Black lives matter. So what you're trying to say is invite people to abundance. Invite them to their goodness. But what we do, because it's the same kind of process, it's about me. So I want to shake my fist and wag my finger because I want to be self-righteous rather than invite people to health and goodness and abundance. You can lament scarcity, I suppose, but it doesn't get you far. And you can stand against hate, but it doesn't get you far except to otherize, except to say, these are the people who don't belong to us. And these are always keys. Demonizing is the opposite of God and the opposite of how Jesus sees. Period. Always, no exceptions. And once you know that, then you go, we belong to each other. And what we're creating is a community of beloved belonging, and you address severed belonging. And that's the task of the Christian, is to address severed belonging. So, I don't want to demonize anybody, not Donald Trump, not people carrying tiki torches. Everybody belongs to me, and I belong to them, and we belong to each other because we live in the same house. And so I think that's important because we get lazy, and sometimes we're not even trying, and because we want to have a them. I stand against this, which means you're otherizing. And if you can refuse to do that, which is the stance of an authentic Christian, it seems to me, there is no us and them, there's just us. Now let's begin there. And then you invite people to their own unshakable goodness and their own innocence and their own health. And pretty soon that works. It not only helps, it works. As opposed to the things that finds enemies. I'm not interested in enemies. And I know that God doesn't see sin, God sees son and daughter. And so I want to be in the world who God is, loving, kind, and compassionate.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Father Gregory Boyle. And, it made me think about, that actually made me remember from Paul Cody, your talk. And he said that we need to listen to the injustice that people are experiencing without being defensive. And I feel like that's some of what Father Gregory Boyle is highlighting about how we're going to have this posture that's inviting people into their goodness without despising them and despising their wounds. How can we be more like that? Can you talk more about that, P? And just, let me know. I want to hear more insight from you.
I think the justice issue is bigger than people have actually given it credit for. There are several injustices that people have a tendency to want to explain away instead of embrace. And when you explain it away, you actually begin to strip the dignity that other people have when you downplay the injustice that they're currently experiencing. Justice is a tricky thing because if we're honest, true justice can only come from, the creator and the authenticator of justice, which is God. Because when you look at justice talks about removing bias and making decisions so that people can actually have what they belong, what they actually deserve, and then go on to enjoy what they deserve. It is not justice if I give you something you deserve and you can't enjoy it. That's still propagating the same injustice that we've talked about over time. And so, Father Boyle, I love when you talked about severed belonging, because really when you look at injustice is severed belonging. You have taken something from someone that they actually deserve to have. And that takes place in several segments. When you look at, whether you talk about police brutality or you talk about housing injustice and inequity, when you talk about prison systems, those things are very large. But because people have trouble having an authentic lens and view of justice, we just continue a process of stripping justice away from people.
Yes, I agree. I do want to take this time to say, I know Father Gregory Boyle, you'll have to be going soon. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. And I pray God bless your ministry at Homeboys. And yeah, I hope we get to talk soon because, like I said, I'm your biggest fan. But yes, I pray God bless you and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Father Greg.
The Lord bless you, Father